W here again. Now that I'm out of office, I have time to tour the West. I did some comparison of the way Hollywood portrayed the Indian Wars and the reality of things. Did you know the cavalry never wore yellow scarves? That was just a Hollywood thing. They also seldom used a saber against the Indians. I also discovered that the Indians that massacred a portion of the 7th Cavalry at the Little Bighorn had repeating rifles. The deed was not done with bows and arrows like portrayed in those Hollywood movies. Of course, the conflict between Americans and the Native Americans, or Indians, dates back clear to the Wars for Empire. But the time frame of 1866 to 1898 covers the westward expansion, when the horse soldier, or cavalry, fought numerous engagements with the American Indian tribes. The Civil War pulled most of the army to the east, and hard-won territories were reoccupied by the Indians. The Sioux warriors massacred over 1,000 settlers in the Dakota Territory. The Utes attacked Idaho, and the Navajo raided in New Mexico. Apaches bloodied Arizona, and the Comanches prowled Texas up to San Antonio. So when the Civil War ended, the U.S. cavalry began focusing on the Indians and launched a series of wars. The cavalry fought against great Indian leaders like Geronimo, Chief Joseph, Crazy Horse, Cochise, Roman Nose, Santana, and Red Cloud. Against them were American cavalry heroes like Sheridan, Crook, General Miles, and George Armstrong Custer. You know, General Crook was the most important leader of the wars against the Indians. He created the major strategy that won those wars. That strategy had 4 parts: winter campaigns, destruction of Indian villages, converging columns, and the use of Indian scouts. His concept was to use winter campaigns as the Indians could not move their villages in the winter months. There wasn't any vegetation and they couldn't hide. This, coupled with converging columns, the art of maneuver, I think that's a Jomini concept, allowed the massing of troops onto the Indians at critical moments. Crook used Indian scouts to help track those tribes. Early morning raids worked best, as the Indians seldom posted security. These early morning raids ended in the ultimate destruction of the Indian villages. When we say destruction of the villages, this, of course, means not just burning up the teepees. It does entail killing most, if not all, of the occupants. A very harsh strategy of war, and a set of rules of engagements that would offend most folks in any modern-day war. The crossed arrows, used as a symbol for Crook's Indian scouts, became the modern-day symbol of the U.S. Special Forces. I guess the Indian scouts could be called the forerunners of the SS. Seems strange that some Indians would join the American Army and fight against other Indian tribes. But again, the tribes were not unified and constantly warring against one another. Crook used this concept to his advantage and recruited Indians, capitalizing on their motivation to be warriors. He knew that fighting was their honor and more important than tribal loyalty. Crook could speak several Indian languages, and when the Indian Wars ended, he made an effort to fight for Indian rights, including the right to vote. So while Crook crafted the strategy that won the wars, and it was a brutal strategy, once the peace was won, he was an advocate for the Indians. Hollywood makes old George Armstrong Custer out to be one of the great Indian fighters. But you know, the old 7th Cavalry had one of the highest desertion rates in the Army. So I bet the troopers were not so fond of old General Custer. For sure, he made a huge mistake at the Little Bighorn, or what most folks know as Custer's Last Stand. June 26, 1876, Custer split his force into 3 parts, giving 140 men to Major Reno and 125 to Captain Benteen. He then took 5 companies and attacked 1,500 Indians along the Little Bighorn River. Custer managed to get himself killed, along with 267 troopers. I guess Custer's men, armed with single-shot Springfield rifles, were no match for 1,500 Indian warriors equipped with repeating rifles. General Nelson A. Miles led the 1876 campaign that drove the Indians north and broke their war power for good. The Nez Perce Indians did not go so peaceful. They killed 69 troopers at White Bird Canyon, in this case only using bows and arrows. Chief Joseph finally surrendered when he was worn down to 87 warriors, stating, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Geronimo was the last great Indian chief to be subdued. General Miles called Geronimo the worst Indian that ever lived. In one raid, Geronimo killed 38 people and stole 250 horses. It took 5,000 troops and an invasion of Mexico to finally catch him for good. The last engagement of the Indian Wars took place in 1890 at South Dakota's Wounded Knee Creek. 25 cavalry troopers died, along with 300 Indians. Wounded Knee is considered the last significant battle against the American Indians. Following the battle at Wounded Knee, the Indian tribes were essentially subjugated and forced onto reservations. Click the link below my icon in the matrix and view the film Crossed Sabers to learn the history of the U.S. cavalry. The clips are all 5 to 10 minutes in length. Some are marked with a red asterisk. Those red marked segments provide some particularly interesting details. If you get a chance to tour the West, visit the Cavalry Museum at Fort Riley and the Frontier Museum at Fort Leavenworth. Well, time for me to continue my tour of the West. You have a great day.